Hello. We want to look at another important area in our study of urban sociology, and that is urban structure and urban growth models. In our discussion, we want to understand the various types of structures or how an urban area is planned and the various functions of those particular structures. Again, we will look at urban growth models in which we want to attempt to understand the various ways through which an urban area grows as proposed by different scholars. It is an important discussion because it is at the heart of understanding the lifestyles, the problems, and the opportunities that are available to urban community. Welcome to this discussion. When we talk about urban structure, what we mean is the arrangement of public and private space in urban setting, and also the ease with which the various spaces can be accessed, as well as the exit opportunities that exist in these spaces. In the context of urban structure, we are also basically concerned with four main areas. That is the central business district, the industrial area, the residential area, and also what we call an urban open space. We will spare time to look at each of these structures and the role they play in the socioeconomic and even political development of an urban area. Again, when we talk about urban growth models, we simply refer to the various explanations that have been forwarded by different scholars in terms of what they consider is the distribution of different social groups and functions within an urban area. Let's now turn our attention to the specific aspect of urban area in order to understand what they are and what purpose they serve in an urban establishment. Start with the central business district. It is also called the downtown, or in short, the CBD. We need to appreciate that the CBD is normally the heart of any city. We cannot have a city without a CBD because the entire growth of a city emanates from the CBD as it grows outward. So CBD, they are normally considered as the centers of financial transactions. That is, it is where most of the financial transactions of business establishments, banks, and related institutions are located. And they also, within the CBD, we have the hotel industry, the entertainment sectors, pubs, and also retail outlets such as supermarkets and others in which city dwellers buy items in small quantities. Although CBD is primarily designed to accommodate commercial transactions or businesses, there are also often a very small population of residences within the CBD, so that there are some times where there are a few dwellers within the CBD, often occupying the upper floors of commercial buildings. But again, I want to mention that it is normally quite a small population compared to the entire population of an area. Another structure of an urban area is called industrial park. An industrial park is basically an area within an urban establishment that is dedicated for industrial development. It is at this area where we find most factories, processing plants, and other establishments that are concerned with manufacturing activities. These areas are intended to attract businesses, and therefore, urban authorities normally establish what we call dedicated infrastructure in these areas to enable them attract businesses. For instance, they have adequate water piping system to enable the production or the manufacturing sector, especially those sectors where the usage of water is quite huge. They also have special power lines that is capable of providing adequate power to power in heavy machines and rather heavy machines. Again, even the road network to these areas are also strong because these areas the road structures are such that they are strong enough to accommodate heavy commercial vehicles that carry raw materials into the factories and also carry finished products from the factories to the distribution centers. So that an industrial park is an important area because this is where most of the production activities take place. An industrial park also are set aside from other city functions such as CBD, residential areas and open space to enable city authorities come up with structures or facilities that can help in control of environmental waste. We need to notice that some of these factories, they emit gases, some of which could be poisonous, others emit dust, others emit water that is contaminated. And therefore, if we are to establish an industry in an area that is heavily populated by residences, then again, we are likely to put the health of members of the urban community at risk. And that is why a dedicated zone for industrial activities is normally put aside by urban authorities so that should there be any aspect of environmental pollution, then that aspect is highly reduced so that a larger proportion of the urban population is not exposed to pollutions such as gases and liquids that might be dangerous to human health. So industrial areas are quite important. The area of urban structure is called urban open spaces. These are basically spaces that urban authorities provide to citizens for purposes of recreation. Again, some serve for purposes of ecological as well as aesthetic values. They can be arranged from highly maintained environments to natural landscapes. Every town, every major urban area has a CBD. Some are well developed and maintained, while others are poorly developed or poorly maintained. But all the same, it is important to note that an urban space is part of an urban planning process. There must be an area where citizens can rest during lunchtime, during weekend, or when they are waiting to do certain assignments in the city. And like I've said, some are properly taken care of, while others are poorly managed, depending on the seriousness with which a given urban authority takes these open spaces. The open spaces, they also offer aesthetic value for citizens who want to enjoy nature. Well-maintained open spaces, they make a city looks beautiful, looks attractive, and quite often you'll find members of the public resting there and even taking photographs and having light meals such as snacks to enable them enjoy nature. But they also have cultural values by providing space for concerts, art, or shows. Again, some of the music concerts, some of the cultural activities, traditional dances, music concerts are normally held in urban spaces, or even places or cultures where activities such as bullfighting plays an important role, or it constitutes one of their cultural or traditional games. Again, most of them are likely to be held in urban open spaces. Therefore, they are an important center where we not only recreate ourselves and refresh ourselves, but they also enter centers where a lot of cultural activities can be held from time to time. But the most important thing about urban open space is that they can also help in controlling runoff, so that there are areas that are dedicated fully with full vegetation, and this one helps in preventing flooding, especially during heavy downpours. From that observation, it is important to note that urban open spaces have recreational, ecological, as well as aesthetic values. They are an important part and parcel of an urban area planning. The other area which I want to mention, although we have not provided a slide, is what we call the residential areas. The residential areas now are the places where urban population reside. And from there, again, a lot of activities are established. The retail shops are available. Small entertainment activities are also available. Otherwise, it is an area that is meant to be fairly quiet, so that in the evening, when people are asleep, we do not have a lot of activities that emanate noise, and which can interfere with people's peaceful nights. Let's now look at the various models, urban growth models that have been proposed by different scholars. One of them is called the concentric ring model. This model was developed in the early 1920s by sociologists Burgess, Robert Park, and Roderick Mackenzie. And in this model, they attempted to explain how different social groups within a given urban area are distributed. And the model observes that a city grows outward from a central area in a series of rings. So that when we look at the illustration that I've given on the on the right side, you can see that at the center that is marked yellow, that is the CBD. And that center, a lot of activities will go on. And once there is limited demand of facilities that are required by the players within the CBD, then the pressure will be mounted on the immediate ring, which is ring 2. So that ring, again, if there are residential houses, some people will buy those residential houses and convert them into commercial buildings where people will hire offices to establish banks, to establish hotels, to establish restaurants, among other activities that go on with a CBD. Again, if the houses there are properly utilized and are exhausted, yet there is still greater demand for additional facilities, then the pressure will be extended to zone 3, zone 4, and zone 5. In other words, this model is telling us that a city grows from a small center, which we call the CBD, and it grows outwards, so that those who are able to afford, or those who can afford the cost of commuting daily to the CBD, are likely to stay as far away as possible from the CBD, while those who may not have the financial means to reside far away from the CBD, they will try as much as possible to stay as close as possible to the CBD, so that the further one moves away from the CBD, the more affluent an individual is, so that the wealthiest segment of the urban population are likely to move furthest from the city, while those that are in the lower economic ladder are likely to live closer to the CBD. So that this trend continues, and it is what leads to the expansion of a city, so that pressure that emanates from the CBD to the nearby residential areas will mean that the facilities within the residential areas will be converted into other uses, and residences or urban population that used to occupy those areas, they would move slightly further away. So the concentric ring model is simply telling us a city grows in form of rings, as we can see and observe on the left side, on the right side of that particular illustration. The other model that has been proposed by scholars to explain how an urban area grows is what we call the sector model. And this theory was developed by Homer, who theorized that cities tend to grow in a wedge-shaped pattern, or what we call sectors. And this one emanates from a CBD, but along the major transportation routes. So this model, while agreeing with the concentric ring model that a city starts growing from a central business district, they disagree as to the pattern that the growth of a given city takes. Concentric ring model insists that a city grows in rings, in a circular manner. However, the sector model insists that a city does not grow in a circular manner, but along the major transportation routes. So that the model suggests that zones expand outward from the city center along major transport arteries. These arteries include the roads, the highways, and others, so that low-income households in an urban area are likely to live closer to the road, rail lines, and also commercial establishments are likely to be along the major streets and highways. It's also the observation of this model that commercial functions of the city, that is businesses, are likely to be concentrated within the CBD, while manufacturing and other activities are likely to be situated along the transportation routes, that is the roads, the railway, the seaports, the beaches, among others. And according to the model, residential functions for the lower class develop closer to the manufacturing or industrial sectors, while sectors of middle and high-income households are likely to be located further away from these functions. It should be noted that the bulk of laborers that are found in the industrial area or in the factories are largely from the lower class, and therefore they tend to live closer to these industries so that they do not commit a lot of money in terms of fare and transportation to and also from work. That is why they tend to live closer to these factories, where they spend less in terms of accessing the factories, and also going back home. So this ring is telling us, this model is telling us that an urban area grows along the roads, along the railway line, and along other major transportation routes. This is completely different from what you find with the concentric ring model. And therefore here, what it means therefore is that lands or pieces of lands that are likely to be closer to the transportation routes, they are likely to be more expensive compared to those that are not served by major transportation systems. This is because as you live closer to the major transport route, the cost of land becomes higher because you spend less in terms of expenses required to transport building materials to access other services. But as you go further and further, it means that you have to commit more to transport yourself to those sectors, to carry building materials, and also to do other things. So that land that is further away from the road is less attractive compared to those that are close to the road. And this explains why they are likely to be more expensive than the others. The last model is called multiple nuclei model. This model is taking a totally different view from the sector model as well as the concentric ring model. While the sector model and concentric ring model argues that a city starts growing from a single CBD outward, although taking different paths. The multiple nuclei model insists that a city need not have to grow from one single CBD, and that there can be several CBDs in any given city, and these CBDs will act, each CBD will act as a center of development and growth. That is what we call the nucleus. They will form what we call the growth nodes. And this CBD, they might begin small, but they will grow. So that if you have a major city can therefore, according to this theory, have as many as 5 different CBDs. Each of these CBDs will have specialized functions so that each CBD is known for a particular function, so that the emergence of these multiple CBDs to different activities are also will be attracted to particular nodes and not others. For instance, if you establish a university and therefore the university becomes the node of a given CBD, then the presence of a university in a given area will attract certain functions and not others. For instance, banks are likely to open around the university because university, together with the students, might require banking services. Bookstores will also open around such a place. Hotels will also open around such a place. And other activities that complement university education are likely to be centered there. Again, if you have something like an airport, given the arrival and departure of visitors, it's also likely to attract the hospitality industries so that people can sleep closer to the airport to catch their flights early enough. Again, others could also use hoteling facilities around the airport as they wait for flights or as they wait for their hosts to pick them. Then other activities such as warehousing facilities are also likely to be established because goods that arrive or goods that need to go outside might need somewhere to be kept temporarily as they await their transportation to other destinations. Again, things like courier services, taxi services are also likely to be available around the airport because travelers would need such services to travel to the airport and also away from the airport. So the multiple nuclei model is simply telling us that what needs to happen is a city need not have one single CBD. It can have different CBDs, and each CBD will be unique to a given line of activities. And once that happens, then it will attract activities that complements the kind of functions that exist there. On the on the right side is an illustration of how multiple nuclei model appear and how it works. I want to thank all of us for listening, and I also want to urge you to take note of any issue that you believe is not clear and which you need further clarification on. You can raise it so that we address it at appropriate time. Thank you so much.